Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a 28-year-old camera operator in Los Angeles meets a struggling actress at a bar. They date for 2 years until he catches her cheating on set. Despite heartbreak, he remains professional. When he considers quitting due to working with her, his boss offers to fire her instead, giving him a raise. He moves on and finds his future wife 2 months later. Now let's get into the story. A 28 male walked to a bar one night after work in Los Angeles, California. I'm a camera operator at Fox Studios. I've worked with several famous actors and actresses. On this particular night, I was hoping to meet a woman. Lo and behold, as soon as I entered, I saw a movie star. Well, a wannabe movie star. When I first sat down by her, she was crying because she was just turned down for a part she really wanted. I bought her a drink and assured her it wouldn't be long until she got her big break. I learned that night that she, 24, female, was currently working as a model for Forever 21 and some other gigs. But her dream was to be in the movies. She'd been in a few small-time films before I met her. When she first came to California, she was 19, staying with her cruel aunt. At an audition, she met another girl in a similar situation. They were able to rent an apartment together. I congratulated her for making it this far. She hadn't met a worse or fate. We talked for a while after that, and when I told her I was a camera operator, she was excited. She asked me what my job entailed, and the way I described it made it sound like anyone could do it. But I did make her laugh. We walked back to my car at Fox Studios, and I gave her a ride home. We exchanged numbers and started calling or texting every day until I eventually picked her up for our first official date. Over the next 2 years, she continued her modeling career and a few acting gigs. I continued my daily work and we continued dating. She'd sleep over sometimes, and each time I thought about asking her to move in, she just didn't seem ready. She always brought over the bare minimum to stay for the night. One day while I was working, there was an emergency. One of the main actresses became extremely sick, so they needed a new actress quickly. I immediately and without hesitation suggested my girlfriend. She came in right away for an audition and she nailed it. They loved her. She was ecstatic, and I was too. I got to stare at her and be with her each day of filming for about 1.5 years. Upon release, the movie did pretty well in the box office, and it was safe to say my girlfriend was moderately famous. We were pretty much living on cloud 9. Life was just really great. It felt like we were living out our creative dreams and simply got to play all day, every day, and get paid for it. It was a little difficult at times, but well worth it. One day while we were filming another movie, I saw her male co-star enter her dressing room, supposedly to rehearse. I trusted her. That night we had plans to go out together, but she told me she was exhausted, so her roommate was coming to pick her up. I was disappointed, but I believed her. It was hard for me to drive away while she waited to be picked up, but it was what she wanted. I got home, got showered, then I realized I left my phone at my workstation. I went back to the set and heard something in my girlfriend's dressing room. Curiosity got the better of me, so I pressed my ear on the door. It was definitely my girlfriend and another man, but they weren't talking. It was the vocal noises of pleasure. My mind was racing. She never left the set. She wanted to cheat on me. After I let her into my heart and really started planning my future with her, I banged on the door, calling for her to open it. She sounded scared. When she told me to hold on, she opened the door in her robe without looking at me. She said AP was just leaving and that they were rehearsing. I furiously told her that I heard what they were doing. All I wanted to know was why. She had the nerve to say I was mistaken and nothing happened, but her voice was barely a squeak. When she said this, AP looked like he didn't care, but he didn't say anything. I screamed for him to get out because I would have knocked him out. He left, and my vision was just red. My world was crashing down. I loved this girl, but I was wrong to think she loved me or knew how to stay in a committed relationship. Maybe fame got to her head, but it still hurt. I didn't expect it at all. I pulled the ring out of my pocket and showed it to her. She gasped. I said I was wrong about her. She just proved herself to be another sleazy, worthless actress. She choked on her sobs, telling me she wanted to get married. She knew she only got this far because of me. She said the romantic role with AP simply got to her head. But she knew she didn't love him. I told her she could have denied him if she took even a moment to consider us. I told her we were over, but I had to continue filming her for the next 5 months. She would ask me how I was doing and talk to me, even when I tried to make myself look busy. Finally, the movie was finished, and I thought I could stop working with her. She was quickly selected for another part. For some reason, several other camera operators Fox had assigned to this upcoming movie quit. The studio was down, me and 2 other people, with me being the most experienced. I didn't want to work with my ex anymore. I heavily considered resigning from the studio and getting a job somewhere else. I decided to talk to my boss about it. But when I said what I was thinking, he begged to know why. I told him honestly what was bothering me. Without hesitation, he told me they would replace her. He simply couldn't afford to lose me for this movie. In addition to firing her, he offered me a raise. I was extremely happy and surprised. That night, I slept like a baby. The next morning, I was off work look, but my ex contacted me when she found out she was fired for causing stress to coworkers. She was really upset and even got mad at me because I complained about her. I told her I was willing to quit, but the boss said he would rather lose her than me. She didn't take that very well, but it didn't matter to me. I was free, and she was stupid. I knew I did the right thing even before I met my future wife. Just 2 months after that. Today's second story. In this story, a couple's 20-year marriage is rocked by a chemical spill disaster. As they seek refuge at a camp, the husband notices his wife's inappropriate closeness to another man. Confrontations escalate as suspicions of infidelity grow. The wife confesses to a brief affair, leading to a heartbreaking separation. Their son sides with his father, severing ties with his mother. Despite her pleas for reconciliation, the family remains fractured, with the wife ultimately abandoned by her temporary lover. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I were together for 20 years when a train derailed 2 miles from our home. It was full of chlorine gas, so when it crashed, a massive toxic cloud formed. We were eating dinner with our 17-year-old son, who was telling us about his day at school. The television was off and our cell phones were in another room. Then we heard the sirens of the fire chief's car driving through our neighborhood to telling everyone on a megaphone to evacuate their homes due to the toxic chemical cloud heading right for us. Once we gathered enough supplies and clothes for a few days and got in the car, we realized that we were one of the last families to leave. Trash was split all over the neighborhood from fallen trash cans, and there weren't any cars in sight. After sitting in traffic for 7 hours, half expecting the cloud to come up behind our car, we finally arrived at Camp Rafiki. It was a summer camp for children turned into a much-needed respite for hundreds of families. We were assigned 3 cots right beside each other among a sea of other cots. We got freshened up and were given any toiletries we forgot at home. Meals were cooked using the camp's kitchen. It really felt like a safe haven, but that feeling would disappear for me as soon as I remembered our home was simmering in a cloud of chlorine. I'd heard stainless steel appliances melt in chlorine gas, so I was devastated. It was going to be a mess in our neighborhood for a while, and I wondered where we were going to stay. My wife started playing the piano in the room for all to hear. There was a crowd of about 30 people around her listening intently, and even more listening from across the room. She started playing piano as a child, so it soothed her and everyone around her. I could tell she enjoyed the attention, but I was just glad she didn't feel as upset as me. Our son was talking with a group of teenagers around the foosball table. Seeing my family so calm and even enjoying themselves suddenly made me feel calm. I went from stressed, intense to relaxed and desperate for some sleep. so I laid on my cot and passed out. I woke up hours later. It was dark outside, and it seemed like everyone was sleeping in their cot except my wife. Her cot was empty, so I took a look around. I found her sitting cross-legged on another man's cot. He was sitting on it with her awfully close to us while she was telling him a story from her childhood. I cleared my throat and asked her to come to bed. She hesitated, and it looked like she tried to think of a reason to stay. But there wasn't any reason I would accept to allow her to continue talking to this guy late into the night. I knew her extremely well by this point, so I knew she knew how bad it was that she was up talking to this guy while I was sleeping. Back at our cots, I asked her why she was talking to him and what. They said she was embarrassed and said it wasn't a big deal. They were just getting to know each other. I asked what she now knew about him. She just said it wasn't important and laid down to sleep. The next day, many of the survivors were playing volleyball or basketball, including me, my son, wife, and AP. After each game or point, I saw him high-five or fist-bump my wife. She was starting it too. It wasn't just him. Then I saw her go in for a hug. He looked so pleased, but then he saw me glaring at him and walked away. She turned to see me and pretended nothing was wrong. Lunch was served, and with our plates in hand, my wife suggested we sit outside. She led our son and I to the table where AP was sitting. I thought about protest, but I didn't want to have to explain why in front of our son. I just ate food and listened to what was said. AP mentioned it would probably be one more day at the camp before everyone could return home. My wife looked sad at the thought of going home. I felt super weird when she asked AP if he was ever lonely living by himself. I didn't know how she knew he lived alone. That must have been something they spoke about while I was sleeping. He said his dog kept him company, but he and I both knew it seemed like my wife wanted to keep him company. I stood up and told them I'd like to go on a family walk. My wife had the nerve to ask me if she could stay behind to finish eating. She only had peas on her plate, and her blatant disregard for me and our son was alarming him. She was already choosing AP over me. I told her to come with us now, so thankfully she did. On the walk with our son ahead of us, I asked her what the heck she was thinking. I had to point out all the obvious ways she was flirting with AP, and she still denied that she was flirting or misbehaving. I told her I didn't want her to talk to him anymore. She didn't say anything, but agreed that was all I needed for her to respect my wishes, even if I was being overprotective. The next day, everything seemed to be going fine, but our son went off with some teenagers for a while. When it was almost time for dinner, I went to find him. He was hanging out by the tree line and really enjoyed talking to this one girl in particular. I was glad he got the chance to meet her. She was homeschooled in the very same neighborhood as us, but might have never met my son if it hadn't been for the chemical spill. He was feeling great about life, so I just told him to be back in a little while for dinner. When I got back to the building filled with cots and people anxious to eat, I couldn't find my wife. I also noticed pretty quickly that AP was gone too. I searched the crowded building and property around until I spotted them about 15 yards inside the tree line. There was a spot without so many sticks and brush they were laying on a blanket, trying to stay out of my sight. As I approached, I yelled to my wife that I could see her, and she was an idiot. With a raised, booming voice, I asked her what the heck she was doing. My emotions were level 10, but it was almost like I couldn't feel them. I was on autopilot on the inside. Because I think if my brain let me feel the full impact of this moment, I would have broken down. My wife stood up sheepishly, clearly ashamed of herself. When she got close to me, she said she was really sorry and wanted to go back with me now. I told her I couldn't just ignore the fact that she was just lying in the woods with AP. He was still lying on the blanket a short distance away, turned away from us, like he was waiting until I left to move. My paranoid brain was telling me he could have easily done something with my wife. Because she was only wearing a short dress, she didn't have much clothing. Resistance against foolish, spontaneous decisions. I stopped her from walking away and asked her if she just slept with AP in the woods while I was looking for our son. She said no right away, but she looked like she was about to cry. I asked why she looked like this, but she just ran away back to the cots. I was getting extremely annoyed and refused to even speak to AP. My wife was acting like someone who suddenly had no idea how to behave like an adult. I decided as I followed her that she was at least having an emotional affair and consciously decided to sneak into the woods with him, where they may or may not have had intimate. This was grounds for divorce, and it never would have happened if the train didn't derail. That night, as our son slept, I woke up my wife and got her to confess. They did have intimate, but it only lasted all but 5 minutes and she completely regretted it. They waited so long to go into the woods that it literally ended right before I found them. I can't explain how terrible I felt at this moment. I felt like home was gone and now my family was too. Then my wife added that she knew AP before this. She'd been over to his house to welcome him to the neighborhood. And a few other times when I was at work, I was fuming. She said they never did anything before this, but I found that very hard to believe because now, in an emergency situation with her own family, she slept with him. I went over to AP as he slept and whacked him over the head with his hardcover book a few times. He was alarmed. Then I had to make myself stop, so I just went outside to jog around the property. I planned out how I was going to separate from and divorce my wife when we were cleared to return to our neighborhood. I told her I was going to file for divorce, so she needed to stay somewhere else. She bawled and cried and begged me to forgive her for our son's sake, so she could come home with us and help clean up the mess left behind so our lives could return to normal. She said 5 minutes of meaningless, mistaken intimate shouldn't be enough to end 20 years of marriage. I told her it most certainly was and said she needed to have a conversation with her son, explaining why she wasn't going to be living with us anymore. Our son despised her. He found it extremely hard to believe that I would just break up with her for no reason, which is all she told him. I didn't care if she planned to go with AP or what, but she did tell me she was planning to call her dad 4 months later. The house I now share with my son was fully stored with the melted appliances and wiring replaced. I told my son by this point what really happened so he might be more prepared for his date in future. Obviously, he couldn't think of his mom the same way after that. He was hurt by her actions too, and he let her know about it. When she called me in tears asking to come back home, she hadn't contacted me or our son in that entire time, but she justified that by saying she didn't want to bother us. I told her already knew from her dad that she didn't stay with him like she said. And as her husband nearly ex, I deserved to know where she spent the past 4 months. She admitted she'd been with AP some of that time, but she just wanted to come home now. In reality, she'd been staying in AP's uncle's shed, while his house was repaired. Once his house was ready to be moved into, he dumped her because 4 months in a shed was all the time he needed with her. That's when our son grabbed the phone and told her he didn't want his father to take her back because he deserved better. Then he hung up on her, and I never answered her calls again.